Today we sit down with Adam Conover, writer, actor, comedian, and member of the WGA board. Today we're going to find out if Adam has a better bad idea. Let's get into it. I'm Sean O'Brien, General President of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters.
Put your helmets on, buckle your chin straps. It's a full contact sport.
We're going to find out who has a better bad idea. So we're here today with Adam Conover. So you are a comedian, writer, social media influencer, I guess, to a certain extent.
So. I am now. That's where the business has gone. So that's what I got to be, and I do okay at it.
It's amazing, like talented people like you starting all this influencing on social media, and then you get a stiff like me trying to give it a shot.
I think you're very authentic. You're a very authentic personality. I think people need to see it. You know, I came to social media from television, but you know, one of the beautiful things about it is that you get people from all walks of life who can.
No, I think it's a great platform. I'm enjoying it thoroughly, especially getting to spend time with people like yourself.
Yeah.
And trying to transform some sort of credibility back to having dialogue, differences of opinions without blowing up a whole relationship or anything like that. And we've seen too much of that lately. So you grew up in Long Island?
Yeah, Long Island, New York. My dad was a public university professor at SUNY Stony Brook. He was a marine biologist. My mom was a teacher. Scientific family. I had a little too much ADD as a kid to like go that route. I topped out at a bachelor's. Everyone else in my family has a PhD. And you know, instead of going to grad school, I went into comedy.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you know, I know having two boys, you know, 23 and 20, soon to be 24 and 21. I remember doing projects with them when they were kids. And I swear to God, these home projects that the teachers sent them home with weren't for the benefit of the kids. They just want to see how involved the parents were. So you coming from a scientific upbringing, your parents must have done your science projects phenomenal.
I had a really good science education as a kid. They never did it for me, but they did it with me, and they did a nice job. I remember being in like, you know, Cub Scouts with my dad and doing like the Pine Box Derby race where you build a little car and stuff like that, and like getting really into like which design was going to have the least drag and like how to weight it and all that.
Oh, so you were like aerodynamic before it was popular.
A little bit.
Did you win?
I don't remember if I won that. I do actually remember, I've never told the story in a podcast. Maybe it won't be an interesting story. But I remember one science project where everyone had to like build a boat, you know, like, and out of styrofoam or aluminum foil, you know, and then you put it in some water and you see how many marbles it can hold. And for some reason, me and my dad, instead of building like a little aluminum foil styrofoam boat, we built one out of plywood, like a large thing that could hold like 3 bricks. Everyone else, like mine hold 3 marbles, and mine held like 15 pounds or whatever. It was just because, just use different materials. You don't need to use the stuff they suggested. You can build it out of something else and like learn a lot about buoyancy.
And you're going to sit here and say your father didn't do your project. That's hilarious. That is hilarious. So what was it like growing up in Long Island? I mean, I'm from Boston.
Yeah.
You know, Long Island, East Coast, and Long Island's famous, right?
It is. First of all, can I just say, like, I love your accent so much. It's the main reason I want to come on the show. Like, because here in LA, I've lived in LA for 10 years. We don't get many like authentic East Coast accents. And you know, growing up on Long Island, the accents are really different. You know, people in Boston talk really different. People in Philly talk different.
You know, I just want to say I have failings. It's a speech impediment.
It's the most beautiful speech impediment I've ever heard.
Great, thank you. You should write hallmarks.
To me, they all sound, all the accents, like they're all of a family. You know what I mean? Boston, New York, and Philly. They're all like a family of accents. And every time I hear one, it pulls me across a room. You know, if I hear like somebody talking with like an authentic like Brooklyn accent at a party in Long Island, I'm like, I got to talk to this person. Who is this? Because it's just like home to me. So I grew up in like kind of East Long Island. It's like Suffolk County, like after the city sprawl ends, but before the rich people. It's sort of like farm country, pretty laid back. Weirdest thing about Long Island is you gotta you get kind of isolated there because the island's so long. You have to drive for 2.5 hours to leave Long Island, and then you're in New Jersey, and then you can start your road trip. And so you end up sort of really marinated in that culture. You can't go in every direction like other people can.
Outside of Boston, the best food in the world.
Yeah, you think on Long Island?
Oh yeah.
What's your favorite?
New York.
Tell me.
I used to go to there was a deli out there. I can't remember the name of it. It was like a Jewish deli.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
You forget how common that kind of food is. Like,
It's not around anymore.
there's a lot less of it. I grew up around, our local pizza place, Mr. G's. It was just some guy named Mr. G. Best pizza I've ever had still, best like chicken parm sub.
Well, when you come to Boston, we'll take you to Sal's Pizza.
Oh, I would love to go.
Sal's Pizza is good.
I would love to. The thing about that kind of food is people say you can't get good pizza in LA. You can if you go to the right place. There's like a couple places that have that good. The thing about Long Island is it's just every single town has 5 great places that you can go anywhere. The average is really high. Same thing for bagels. Every bagel shop, they're making the bagels by hand in the back. They're boiling them in the big vats.
They're not frozen like everywhere else?
No.
So you have a sister.
Yeah.
Yeah. Older or younger?
Younger. Her name's Emily. She's a science reporter in DC. She works for a wonderful magazine there called Science News. And we have got a baby niece in the family now. It's really wonderful.
That's good stuff. So how was a sibling rivalry growing up? Was there any or?
I was like, I was, again, had ADD. I was like a loud, impulsive kid. She was like quiet and studious. So that was like the dynamic, like I was running around yelling and screaming. She was trying to like do her studies in the corner. You know what I mean? She takes after my dad a little more. I take after my mom a little more. She was like the good one, but I was the one who got all the attention.
Well, you definitely know how to manipulate your mother, right?
Yeah. Just by demanding that everybody look at me all the time,
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was the kind of kid, you get a lot of attention. It's not always good attention, right? A lot of times it's like, why are you doing that? Like, stop making all that. No, stop running around. Why did you say that? And so I felt like chastised a lot. And I think that's what made me go into comedy was I just wanted people to give me positive attention. I didn't want to be yelled at anymore. I wanted to like somehow make people happy with what I.
But you would agree you probably deserve to be yelled at, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, no, I'm a piece of shit, man.
Join the club.
Comedians are just like that kid who, people say, the class clown. The class clown is like the kid with ADD who's like emotionally disturbed, who doesn't have a good home life, who like needs help. That's why that kid is behaving that way. And that's what comedians still are. We're still, the kid who can't fucking shut up. And if we just could get our shit together, we wouldn't need to draw so much attention to ourselves.
So, it's funny. I'm feeling like I was an awful parent because my oldest is an aspiring comedian and, I never gave him credit for being fucked up.
This is maybe you can give yourself a little grace and say, I am a good parent because whatever way you fucked him up, that is what is going to make him a good comedian. That is what he's going to harness. And you can say, I did that. I made him that little.
Good. I want him to make some money to get him off my payroll.
Well, if you want to make money, maybe you should be a Teamster instead of a comedian.
He's a plumber. He's a union plumber. So
tell him to stick with that.
We've got that covered. It was, he's a great kid. But, I've gotten to... look into the comedy world a lot more now that he's involved in it. He dropped this on us. I've said it on different podcasts. He dropped this on us probably about 2.5, 3 years ago. And he's a great kid, wasn't outgoing, wasn't the class clown.
Yeah.
Probably has a little ADHD like we all do. But I didn't see it coming. And so like anything else, when you have a child and they have dreams and aspirations, my goal is to, give them the reality and crush their dreams and aspirations. Right. But I went to couple of his shows. He's very committed to it. And it's funny, you get to learn a lot about the comedy scene in a small area like Boston. We grew up with Lenny Clark, who's a great guy.
Famous scene. That's like legendary that time in Boston comedy.
Steve Sweeney.
Yeah.
Steve Sweeney graduated high school with my mother. It's a little frightening that he's 77 years old and he's still doing comedy shows on Friday nights. So, but he loves it. And Tony V and a lot of those guys.
Yeah.
So Dennis Larry's from Worcester.
Yeah.
I don't know Dennis, but I know the other guys pretty well. And the one thing about the comedy circuit in Boston, I was a little concerned about because I grew up in the 70s and 80s. And those comedians, you know, a lot of drug use, a lot of alcohol abuse, a lot of mental health issues. And when my son got into it, I kind of was like, all right, you know, he's not a drug addict, doesn't drink a lot, typical 23-year-old kid, 22-year-old kid. My concern was the industry and all the temptations that I witnessed or that you read about growing up. But it doesn't seem to be like that anymore.
There's some amount of it, you know. I would say I have so many of my friends in comedy are sober. You know, I quit drinking years ago, and I never had a huge problem like some of my friends did. But you know, people like I sometimes it feels like I know more sober comics than comics who drink, and a lot of it is survival because when you get started, they're paying you in drinks. I started in New York City, and you know, doing shows in bars, and they pay you in drink tickets. And you know, if you're drinking a whiskey on the rocks before the show to loosen up, and then 3 afterwards because you're hanging out, like you're just binge drinking every single night, and it's just bad for, you can't help but be like, this is bad for me. And so a lot of people, I think, stop for that reason because it's like, I don't know, it's like a drug dealer who's not using their own products. You know, it's like the drinking's for the people at the show. That's to get them loosened up. But if you start touching it, like, you know, it's bottomless for you.
The other thing that I learned about it is, you know, he's with a group of people that, you know, they're aspiring comedians, but they all watch out for each other. It's kind of funny. Like if they're going to schedule a show, you know, they've got the same crew that they run with, and or if they can't schedule someone, they're like, hey, I know a good guy. And it's like kind of like this small community that look out for each other. Is that typical on a larger venue where you operate?
Absolutely. There's a lot of solidarity between comedians. And it's funny because just, you know, in a union context, there's never been a durable like stand-up comedy union. There's been a couple attempts. There's a famous one in the 70s at the Comedy Store that there's a really great book about called I'm Dying Up Here. But there's never been, you know, any organization in stand-up comedians. Stand-up comics really work solo, but because we're so solo, we have a lot of kinship with other people who are doing it. And one of the things I love about it, this is my own belief about doing comedy, is all you have to do to be a comedian is to do it. If you start going to open mics and you do 5 open mics and you say, I'm going to keep doing them, you know, I'm going to do a couple a week from now on, you're a comic. You might be an open mic comic. You might be a shitty open mic comic. The other open mic comics might say, this person sucks, I don't like them.
Right.
But they'll say, well, yeah, she's a comic. He's a comic, right? So because once you are taking the stage and simply trying to do it, that's the hard part. That's the part that most people never do. You know, when people say, I can't believe you do that. That's a crazy thing about stand-up comedy. People will say to me, I can't believe you do that. How do you do it? I'm like, it's pretty easy. You go stand up in front of the microphone. People are terrified of it. It's like a lot of people's biggest fear. It's like skydiving or something to them. And it does involve, you know, building up your calluses. You have to like take the risk and you're going to bomb and be used to it. And so when someone else is doing that, you're like, yeah, they're a comic. We're in the same boat. And that's powerful.
I mean, it's like anything else. You do have to have repetition. You do have to, you know, continuity and keep doing it. But you do have to have some creativity and some talent. I mean, not anybody can just get up there and do 15 open mics and, you know, be successful. It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of time, and you have to have a lot of patience to do it. Now, just going back, you went to, I'm going to try and pronounce this because I don't pronounce my Oz. Bard University.
Oh my God.
You like that one?
That was incredible. You held on to that R so hard.
Did you see the struggle though?
I heard you go into
Bard.
it. Bard. That was that was great.
Yeah.
I've never seen a Boston guy try
You
to
never
do that.
will either. This is like, that's it. So
yeah, it was Bard College, but
Bard College.
Yeah, it's fine. It's not a university; it's a college. But I was blown away, man. That was impressive. Yeah, it was a wonderful school. I was really lucky to get to go there. You know, I was really lucky that my parents, you know, busted their asses to give me the opportunity to go there. I'm really grateful. Not a lot of debt on my life, which enabled me to go into comedy. It gave me an opportunity a lot of other people didn't. They just like. I don't know if other people have experienced this. The way that my parents' standard of living increased after me and my sister graduated college. You know, I would visit them at home. I'd be like, you guys are buying like good food now. Like, oh, you got like a nice car. And then they moved into a better house. And I was like, oh, they were living so beneath their means for 20 years.
You were a drag on them.
Exactly. That's why I'm not doing it now.
You were the weight around their ankles.
I know.
On their way down to the bottom of the ocean.
They were
as
like,
soon as you left.
They were like,
just like my kids. Look, I encourage them to be ambitious, do great things. And I really want to see them do that. but the motive is get them off my payroll as quick as possible. So what was your college experience like? Did you know, I mean, you majored in philosophy,
Yes.
right? And probably smoked a lot of weed while you were.
A fair amount. I may be too anxious back
Yeah.
then. Now I smoke more. I've learned to handle it a little bit better. But you smoke weed in college. You're just sitting silent in the dorm room in the circle, in the bong circle, going like, everybody thinks I'm so stupid. They think what I said is so stupid.
So what is a philosophy major?
That's a really good question. And that's actually the first question of philosophy class. They're like, what is a philosophy major? Why are you doing this? No, I mean, I got really obsessed with the wonderful thing about the college I went to is it was a place where I really got to study what I wanted to study and chart my own path and follow what I was interested in. And what I was interested in is figuring out, those big questions. Why do I know what I think I know? Do I really know it? What is reality? What is truth? What is art? And philosophy is the field that actually thinks about those things in a deep way. Now, it never really finds an answer.
Well, that was going to be my next question.
About it.
So whatever answer you come up with to the question or the theory, is that the right answer?
That's such a good question. I mean, the funny thing about philosophy versus science comes to answers that are durable. We know how the sun works. We figured it out. We know how gravity works. There's unanswered questions, but you can get to a point where all the scientists agree except for the three crazy guys, right? Philosophy, it's like everything is built on sand. You can go, here's my theory. I laid it out. The great philosophers of the past, Immanuel Kant or whatever, Nietzsche, they lay out their whole theory and you read it and go, this is brilliant, except that everybody else disagrees with them and you could debate about it forever, right? But I started
kind of like what's going on in the world today,
a little
especially
bit,
in the United States.
A little bit, right? I mean, there are not many truths that are firm, right? And we live, as a country in different realities, and it's hard to even have that conversation about what is the nature of truth. It seems like we have philosophical disagreements between ourselves. In philosophy, it's called epistemology. How do we know what how do we know that we know what we know? But I sort of realized philosophy is a little bit more of an art form than a science. It's about the process of thinking clearly and investigating what you think you know. And I really fell in love with it. I wanted to go to grad school because that was my family background, but none of my professors were like, yeah, you should. they were like, you could.
They were like,
Yeah.
The world needs plumbers and electricians.
It definitely does, because the philosophers definitely don't know how to fix a fucking toilet, and they're breaking.
Yeah, but they can analyze on why it broke.
Yeah, they're like, I took too big a shit in it.
Right,
and,
exactly.
And now I broke it. I can't fix it.
Right.
So, philosophers spend a lot more time trying to answer the questions than actually answering them. But so around that time, though, that I was a graduate in college trying to figure out what was going on, my college sketch comedy group that I was in, me and a bunch of my friends had a sketch comedy group.
So go back to that. How did you get interested in the comedy sketch group at Bard College? Sorry.
Well, I always loved comedy, and a friend of mine started a comedy group, and I was like, I want to be in it.
Who was your favorite comic?
Really good question. George Carlin was the first stand-up comic that I fell in love with, who really, really affected me.
Didn't he have the alphabet, all the bad words from A to Z?
I actually don't know that bit, but it sounds like one of his.
I think he did it, and every bad word he went from A to Z.
He was such a beautiful soul, because he was doing confrontational counterculture comedy. He was really filthy. He was really nihilistic at times in his career, but he also was this lover of language. So many of his bits are just him playing with language in a poetic way. And he was also a philosopher. He was thinking deeply about the world and trying to understand it and trying to think about what are the problems of humans. And he was sort of in his late career, he was just traveling around the country saying the most insane things. This is before 9/11. He had a bit where he was like, I like to see a disaster on the news. I like to see people jumping out of buildings. This was again, before 9/11. But this is such a bizarre thing to be saying. And people were paying to fill theaters to watch him say it, because he was giving them something that they didn't get anywhere else in their lives or in the media. He was provoking them, And he actually had I read this years later, but in his final memoir, Last Words, he has a line about how, you can teach people with comedy. When people are laughing, their defenses are down. And at that moment, you can plant a little seed, and then maybe later that seed will grow. That was how he thought about what he was doing.
But in reality, I mean, look, you think about it. When people are laughing, they're pretty happy.
Yeah.
When you're crying, people are sad, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so maybe he knew something way back when. Maybe he had it figured out.
I mean, making people happy is really important and powerful, and it gives people relief, But you also have that opportunity to change how they think a little bit. Like I remember bits of his that changed the way that I thought. And so long story short is I sort of had this sense of when I was leaving college, I was like, oh, I would love to do philosophy, but that's not a good career path for me. I have ADD. I can't do the reading. It's not really a career. But with comedy, maybe I can talk about the same things I'm interested in and, work with ideas and talk to people and like change their minds maybe, or at least make them laugh, affect
or
them
maybe
in
the
some way.
conversations you have as a result of your discipline in philosophy, even though you may have an opinion of something, talking to people, getting a difference of opinion may change your mindset.
Absolutely. It's part of being, open and receptive to the world,
Probably what we should be doing every single day in this country.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'll tell you a funny story
Please.
about comedy. So where I grew up, there was this, you probably remember it. It's called the Record Box. Remember that in Medford Square? And my brother set me up for this one, my older brother, because I have two brothers, one older, one younger. And Eddie Murphy, Delirious, or one of Eddie Murphy's things came on. This store was called the Record Box. You'd go in there and they had all kinds of cassettes, all kinds of records and all this stuff. So Eddie Murphy was hilarious, but the shit he talked about was outrageous, right?
Yeah.
Funny.
Yeah.
So I had, I had a few bucks, went down and I bought the Eddie Murphy cassette. So my brother's like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. It's not that bad. And I never listened to it. He goes, just get that. So we're all sitting down, we didn't sit down for dinner a lot because my dad worked a million hours. My mother was busy raising us and just trying to stop some of the chaos. So my brother's like, hey, you should play that Eddie Murphy thing you bought today at the Record Box. And I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't even listen to it, right? And they're playing it, and I could just remember looking over my father, and he's like, what? He's looking at my mother, what the fuck? And he was doing Mr. T as being gay.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my God. My father's like, rips it apart. And my older brother is laughing his balls off. And I'm like, really? I had no clue. I was like in 5th grade, but it was fucking hilarious.
That's what comedy is for.
Yeah. Comedy. Eddie Murphy got me 3 fucking weeks in my room. Thanks, Eddie.
Yeah, but he changed he changed your dad's mind. Your dad thought about it later and went, oh yeah, what if Mr. T were gay? Yeah. Oh, that's an interesting idea. Maybe his mind was opened a little bit, right?
Yeah, that'd be like
probably not.
That'd be like another series on HBO, like Oz. You know what I mean?
It would.
So you get into comedy.
Yeah.
How long did it take? I mean, you've had a pretty successful career. You're a young man. You get a birthday tomorrow, I believe. Right?
On Sunday, correct? Yeah.
Yeah. 42, 41?
42. I'll be 42.
Yep. So 22 to 42, 20-year span.
Yeah.
You've had a pretty good career, but it probably wasn't easy.
It wasn't. I was very lucky in a lot of ways. My sketch group from college, we had a lot of success in the early internet. We made videos. It was pre-YouTube. We edited them and I compressed them myself using QuickTime, and we put them on our own website and stuff. But we had a lot of success. People were watching us. People were buying tickets to come see us.
No, you were in New York at this time?
Yeah, we all moved to New York after college.
Okay.
And did comedy at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater and some other theaters around there. We would tour a little bit. We would do colleges. We got a deal with this early internet comedy website called Super Deluxe to make videos for a little while. Then that ended. The group broke up, and I started doing stand-up comedy. And
why did the group break up?
We were at that point
You tried to run fast.
It was it's a good question. We were like 5 guys in our early 20s, we were fucking assholes to each other, right? Like we didn't have any professionalism. We had gone to college together. So we treated each other just like any young group of guys. with no filter and this sort of social hierarchy, you know, that you have when you're guys like that, right? There are a couple guys on the top. I was at the bottom. I got shit on all the time. I was the butt of every joke, you know, and I always had to convince them that my ideas were good, whereas their ideas we would just make, right? Because they were the alphas in the, you know, in the group. And, you know, after a while, the tensions just sort of, you know, people weren't getting along anymore. And one guy left and another guy left.
Did you guys have any brawls or anything?
No, we were too big pussies to actually fight each other. We were
you were like the Big Bang Theory gone wrong.
A little bit. I was definitely the nerdiest one. But you know, one of the guys wanted to go. He moved to an island off the coast of Belize because he wanted to like retire early. Little bit of a.
What, did he live next door to McAfee?
Yes, he lived on the same island as McAfee. Yeah, and he lived there for 10 years. He was like in his 20s. He was like, I kind of want to move to, you know, tropical island and just scuba dive. Like, all right, I guess you don't want to do comedy anymore. One of the other guys left to go solo and write for TV. He ended up being a very successful TV writer. Created the show BoJack Horseman and a couple other shows. We're still
you guys still
friends.
tight, right?
Yeah, still tight with him. My good friend Raphael.
And you lived with him when you first came out to LA.
Correct. Yeah, we were roommates together for 3 years. And you know, it's hard being roommates with your creative partner, right? With someone who you're professional with. You work all day and then you go home and you live together. You can do that for a couple years in your early 20s, you know. But after a while, we sort of had to strike off on our own, and you know, I needed to be by myself because I realized, you know, I was part of the social structure of this group where, you know, again, I was sort of on the bottom of the totem pole. I needed to strike out on my own and be like, no, my ideas are worth enough by themselves, you know. And so we had like a lot of early success in the group. We had you know, managers and agents, and we had done festivals. We went to the HBO Comedy Festival in Aspen, which was a big festival at the time in like 2007. And then the group broke up, and I was like, oh, I'm on my own, and I had to just sort of start from zero and start doing open mics, you know, and put my ego aside. I shouldn't have to do this. I'm a successful comedian. Well, I was still 23, 24. So why shouldn't I start at the bottom? And so I just started hitting the pavement and, you know, doing what I had to do to try to swim in New York comedy. And I'm so glad I had that opportunity of having a little bit of success and then a lot of failure and having to start again. Because I know people who don't get any of that until they're in like their 40s, and then they get that first bit of success and they're like, oh, it has to be this way forever. And you need to have had the experience of succeeding and then failing.
Well, I think the good part is, you know, to your point, I had great success. You think it's going to last forever. It doesn't.
Yeah.
You've got to recreate yourself, climb out of that hole. But I think you get a better appreciation of, you know, what you've created for yourself as a result of yourself.
Yes.
And you don't want to lose that. So you're going to be even more motivated to protect it and get better at it.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's a great life lesson. I don't think people sometimes take into consideration that a little bit of struggle or a lot of bit of struggle is good if you stick with it.
Yeah.
So you leave New York. Why'd you leave New York?
So I was working at the website College Humor, which was a dream job at the time. I got to write 2 sketches a week and be in them for, you know, we were putting them on YouTube in like 2011, 2012. And then they forced us all to move to Los Angeles. They said, you can move to Los Angeles or you can lose your job, basically. And at first I said, I don't want to do it. And then I realized I was, you know, I didn't know if I was going to have another job that was going to be that good in comedy, and sort of have to say yes to life a little bit.
So this is 2011.
That was 2014.
What is the money like back then?
I think I was making probably 60 grand or something like that. I had health insurance. You know, I was able to pay my rent, do comedy. It was a pretty good living at the time. Unfortunately, that entire industry is gone. You know, there used to be an industry of online comedy websites, Ours, Funny or Die, Above Average, all these sites. And, you know, they're just murdered by Facebook and YouTube. They like were just aggressively killed by the tech industry. And so now there are not, unfortunately, jobs where you can make, you know, a middle-class income, writing comedy and getting health insurance.
That's
for a
ironic.
website.
I mean, technology back then destroying jobs. And technology right now has the potential to destroy more jobs.
It's
in a different form.
You know, to me, the distinction I always draw is it's not the technology itself. People always want to blame the technology. I think that's a dodge, because the CEOs will say, "Oh, it's the technology. You gotta, you know, make way for the new thing." No, it's what the CEOs decide to do with.
Well,
the
the technology is going to increase their bottom line of their balance sheet, right? But what we do and we focus on, and we'll get into this a little bit later, is there is a lot of opportunity to create jobs as a result of technology.
Absolutely.
And I think early on, especially from year 2000, probably till about, 2 or 3 years ago, people didn't realize. They just accepted, well, it's technology and there's nothing we can do about it. There's a lot you can do about it. There's a lot of jobs that can be created. So you go out to California.
Yep.
Are you in the union at this point in time or no?
No, not yet. Although actually the Writers Guild East did try to get College Humor to unionize right after I joined. Like they sat us down and they brought a bunch of Daily Show writers out to explain to us, hey, here's what would be great about, when you join the union. And the rest of the writers in College Humor didn't really want to rock the boat. They're like, hey, we're all doing okay. We got health insurance. It's not that big a deal. And so I wanted to do it, but we didn't join the union at that time. But I knew how important the union was because I had watched the writer's strike in 2007, from the sidelines. I was just a aspiring comedy writer, but I saw what they were doing and that they, won jurisdiction over the internet, right, with that strike. And so I sort of had that in the back of my mind. This is what a union can do.
And your parents weren't in the union?
My parents had probably been in certain like teacher or university unions, but those are pretty, pretty low key unions. At least they were where we grew up, because especially state university employees, like they're pretty protected under law. They don't have to get real.
Yeah, a lot of stuff's legislatively done.
Exactly. So I think that sort of thing. But when the reason College Humor moved us out to LA was they wanted to sell TV shows. And I got pretty lucky. I created a series for College Humor called Adam Ruins Everything, that we did a couple episodes as a web series, and we were able to sell it to True TV, cable network, and they took a chance on me. I had not hosted a television show before, but I created and hosted that show. And the first year that we did it, it was non-union for the Writers Guild. It was Screen Actors Guild, and it was IATSE, the crew union, but it was not SAG-AFTRA or it was SAG-AFTRA. It was not direct. It was not Directors Guild or Writers Guild. And I was able to convince them after the first year was a success. I told them, hey, if we really want this show to be good, if we want to like win awards, I need to be able to hire the best writers. And the only way I can hire the best writers is if we're Writers Guild. Same thing for the Directors Guild. And they flipped the show. We were able to get them to flip the show, which was a big deal. And so I entered the union as a showrunner, which is, the highest job title in our union, having like flipped it. And I sort of didn't realize.
So you were kind of like an organizer.
I was an organizer without
realizing it.
Without realizing it. Yeah. I mean, it was actually an easy flip because
you knew the value of the talent.
I did.
In order to make that project successful, you needed the best talent. The best talent were covered under a collective bargaining agreement.
Exactly
under
right.
the WGA.
Yep. Our first season, we had a couple writers who were not in the union, and we had a couple people who were they're like, I can take the job for a little bit. No one's going to get too mad at me, But I was like, I can't ask people to work for me that way again. They're like, yeah, we all got to go. We helped you out for a little while, but we're not going to stick around. This isn't a stable job. And I knew if I wanted real comedy writers, they're all in the guild, and the guild writers can't work on non-guild shows. And plus, I wanted the health insurance.
Plus, you get the health insurance, and you get the pension. I believe there's a pension.
There's an incredible pension.
Right. Yeah. So, I tell people all the time, I'm a 4th generation Teamster.
Yeah.
Teamster. Right.
Teamster.
Right. And
was that good?
I'll be 53 years old in April, and I have had Teamsters insurance my entire life.
Amazing.
And I know the value of it. Growing up as an active boy, with 2 active siblings, where we were at the emergency room frequently, and I never once saw my mother waver about how we were going to pay for this health insurance because we just knew we were covered. The Teamsters had us.
The amount of security you get from the Writers Guild health insurance, first of all, there's like virtually no premium. You can cover your entire family. Like one earner can cover an entire family. And it's just like the best health plan. I mean, I've been on other insurance and, stuff gets rejected, et cetera. Writers Guild still rejects some, the health plan still rejects some claims or whatever, but it is like, it's the best health insurance you could possibly have. And it's life-changing.
I mean, that could probably help you dating wise too. I mean, I know my partner, I caught her going through some information the other day about, the summary plan description. And she keeps telling me that I'm good looking, I'm in good shape, and that I'm a good person. But I think she has a motive all for the health insurance.
It's almost like a green card, It's like you got something so great. I got to get on this health plan,
I mean, immigration's not a big topic right now, right? But So you're in the WGA.
Yes.
You're doing all this great work.
Yes.
You look back and saw how effective the WGA was in the 2007 strike.
Yeah.
As far as what they can do for their members, what they offer as far as protections. When did you actively get involved in the union? Because you're a board member of the WGA.
I am.
And you were very vocal and instrumental, kind of like a spokesperson during the most recent strike. But when did you actually feel the need to get involved and get on the board? Because look, you're busy.
Yeah.
Right? I've been a union activist my entire life. The only thing I ever wanted to do was be the president of the Teamsters, and obviously I reached that goal, but it wasn't easy because you've got in the middle of my climb, I'm working my regular job, volunteering at the union, trying to make a name for myself and also raise a family, and then you want to add this extra burden of advocating for union people. I knew this is what I want to do because I saw it my entire life. I grew up seeing how influential the Teamsters Union was and how loyal they were to the members and the families. I mean, everything we have in our entire life was because of the Teamsters Union. And I'm a very loyal person and passionate person, probably to a fault at times, where I knew, look, this is the organization that has given me everything in my entire life. And I got to give back to this organization twofold. But you didn't have that same upbringing around the dinner table, talking about the WGA, talking about how influential it is. What triggered you to get involved?
Well, I did have, again, watching those past strikes and hearing other writers talk about it. And then I had the experience of being in the union and feeling the benefits, right? And seeing my pay go up, getting that residuals check, right? That's like a really important Writers Guild benefit that, when we write stuff, unlike other writers, like a novelist or a playwright gets to keep the copyright to their book, right? But we give our copyright to the companies. What do we get in exchange? We get residuals. So we write something, and then when it's broadcast, we receive money from it. And so that's really powerful to feel that, okay, they did reruns, but I got paid more.
Yeah, and those residuals don't expire necessarily, right?
They sort of have a long tail off. Depends on where they're broadcast,
right.
So and if they stop rerunning it, you stop getting them. But a lot of people have the experience of receiving many years after the work comes out. You get a check for a couple grand, and you're like, oh, okay, I don't have to worry about
car
my
insurance.
rent. Yeah, exactly. It covers it. So I had felt those benefits, but then what happened was we picked a fight with our agents, the agents who represent writers, because what the agents had done was their business has started to change, which was the agencies, CAA, UTA, WME.
I was just going to ask you about CAA because I went out there probably in 2006, 2007, and I visited with CAA because as you know, the Teamsters are very influential and have a strong presence in the motion picture industry.
Yeah.
My father worked as a transportation coordinator out of Local 25 in Boston for 51 years.
Wow.
And so we kind of knew about Hollywood and everything else. And then the business changed probably in the late 90s, 2000, where states were offering tax incentives to film. So I spent a lot of time going out to LA and meeting with executives and, state leaders in Massachusetts to bring this work to Boston. We had a meeting at CAA.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what CAA was. It was like a management company, I think, for writers, actors, and the whole industry. And I remember walking into this building as a president of the Teamsters in Boston in 2006, 2007, saying, in my mind, I'm like, this is a money grab. This is a money grab. Like, who the fuck has a building this nice and this big?
Yep.
And who is paying for it?
Yep.
You.
Exactly right.
So you're paying for that. And what are you getting in return?
That's a very good. That's what everybody asks about their agent is what actually am I getting for my 10%? So the way the agency business used to work is, we pay them 10% of our income and they go get us jobs, right? And they negotiate, and they know everybody, they call them and say, hey, you should hire Adam, right?
But they negotiate on behalf of an individual.
Exactly.
Right. So you have a collective bargaining agreement as a WGA member.
Yeah.
Which that's probably the minimum of what
got it.
The minimum of what you are going to earn. On top of that, whatever you negotiate as an individual.
Exactly right. So
that's the agent who takes 25% of your earning
25% is if you add up your lawyer, your manager, and your agent, that's 25%. Normal agent fee by itself is 10%. But yeah, you got it exactly right.
That's like an organized crime syndicate.
It's crazy. And they do it by being middlemen, you know?
Right.
So the union negotiates our minimum, right? That's what we do together. That's collective bargaining. And then the agent is responsible for all the money on top of that, right? What we call overscale. But you are correct. It is a money grab because the agencies are professional middlemen. They say, we have all the talent. And they say to the studios, if you want the talent, you got to come through us. Okay. So they're in a power position similar to a union, except it's not democratic like a union is. We don't actually have control over what the agency does. So what the agencies have started to do over 10 years was they started to create their own production arms. Like literal production companies. And they started to cut deals with the studios themselves. They say, instead of us taking 10% from the client, we will take 3% of the total budget from Sony or from, MGM.
Yeah. So at that point in time, when they're doing deals like that, whose interest do they actually have? Whose best interest?
Exactly the question. Because if I'm not paying them to negotiate on my behalf, in fact, they're being paid by my boss, how can I trust them to negotiate my salary? They're not on my side. I'm not paying them. They're being paid by my boss.
Wait, you mean an employer doesn't look out for the best interest of their employees?
I don't think they do, Sean.
They definitely do.
In fact, I think that their bosses might be pissed off if they did, because they have a fiduciary responsibility, the shareholders, to cut costs, right? So this is a clear conflict of interest. And so the Writers Guild realized we need to do something about this. And we actually, under California law, we are the ones who allow the agencies to represent writers, because we exclusively represent writers and we have a carve out for the agencies. So we said to them, we need to renegotiate this, and we're going to leave all of our agents if you don't, end these conflicted practices. And this was a little bit controversial in the Writers Guild, like any other, job action.
It depends where you are at the pecking order. If you're a very successful writer, you're doing great, you're making a ton of money, you don't really care about these agents, right?
Yeah.
If you're at the bottom trying to work your way up,
exactly,
that's a significant amount of money for services that probably are minimal at best.
And when you're one of those low writers, you don't have the leverage with the agencies. J.J. Abrams, or name another big writer, they can say, hey, fuck you, CAA, do what I tell you to. But if, more someone like me, I'm closer to the bottom, you don't have that kind of leverage to pull it in your favor. So we have to convince all of our members, to get on board with this. And I, just as a rank and file member, was like, this makes a lot of sense to me. I think we really need to do this. I had experienced the conflict of interest myself. And so I started going to the meetings, and we hold these big, so the Writers Guild, I love our union so much. We are super democratic. We are super flat union. We do these giant meetings in, a union hotel in LA. We'll rent out a ballroom. 500 to 1,000 members will show up at once.
How big is the WGA?
About 10,000, 11,000 members.
Okay.
There's also the Writers Guild East, which is our sister union that we're in coalition with. And so depends on how you slice it, but 10,000 to 14,000 depending on the year and what kind of people you're counting. So we'll have these big meetings, and the leadership sits up in front of the membership, and then they present, hey, here's what we think we should do. We think we need to take this action against these agencies. And then the members get to stand up and ask the leadership questions, and the leadership sits there until every single member's question is answered.
As they should.
It'll be 4 hours long, right? And I realized, oh, hold on a second. I think that we should do this. If I get up first, if I just sit by the microphone, and I'm not doing anything shady, I'm just standing up, to be first on the microphone, I can talk to the assembled membership, and I can say, guys, I think this is really important, and here's why. And I can make an argument, and then afterwards people came up and said, oh, you made a good point. You convinced me, right? And I was like, this is so fucking cool, because it's a real democratic process.
What a great concept, right?
Yeah.
Presenting an idea, having dialogue and debate and disagreement, but coming up with a solution and a direction that's in the interest of the betterment of the body as a whole.
Exactly right.
That's a fucked up concept, isn't it?
It's unbelievable that we could actually have that in America. Right? And it was, I was like, wow, this is democracy in a way I've never experienced.
Well, it's power too. Think about it. So I have 1.3 million members that I have the honor and privilege to represent. And the one thing that we are different from any other union, I think, is we are the most transparent and most inclusive union in the world. And we have to be that way because, our members' opinions matter. Yeah. And if we get up and we want to preach and tell people what's good for them, That's not good for us as a whole.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of times like I think I got these great ideas. I got a better bad idea, right? And then once you present it and you listen to other people's opinions that don't agree with you, it may trigger it. 9 out of 10 times with me, it triggers, oh, wait, you know what? I'm not 100% right on this issue.
Yeah.
You know, what she said or he said makes sense. Let's incorporate that into our argument, into our strategy. And I think it's the best thing in the world. And people don't like to be criticized.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate it. But
well, if you're in union leadership, you're going to get criticized.
But it's very effective.
Yeah.
It's very effective and guiding at the same time.
Yeah. The job of union leadership is to reflect the will of the membership, because the only power of the union is the power of the membership.
That's who you work
to
for.
Withhold their labor. Yeah.
That's your employer, the rank and file members.
Because if you don't have them behind you, then you have no power. And the problem is a lot of unions in America have forgotten that. But for the Writers Guild,
seems like the Democratic Party.
They certainly have as well.
I had to throw that out there, buddy.
I'm not going to argue with you on that one. At the end of this agency campaign, right, we got these 4 gigantic companies that have private equity backers. They have all this investment, right?
And by the way, your pension funds are probably investing in a lot of these private equity funds.
Absolutely.
So you're investing in your demise.
Absolutely they are. So we left our agents. We stayed away from them for about a year and a half. Where we were doing our own deals, right? Not working with these agencies. The agencies had no idea how to deal with it, because they're not employers. They're not used to anyone going.
So were the agencies? Did you see a different side of those agencies where originally when you basically fire them?
Yeah.
Right. Did they go out there and try and disparage?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So you see the worst of people when they're desperate.
Yeah. They would call. I got these phone calls. They called me and they said, Adam, we really don't think what the Writers Guild is doing makes it. We have your best interests at heart. We love writers. We want to help you. And I said, okay, why then? The last time I created a show, did you tell me you wanted to package the show? That was what they called it, and get 3% of the budget. And I don't pay you a commission. You told me that was really good for me, but you didn't tell me all the details of the deal. And then once I found out, I realized I was disadvantaged by this. Why did you not tell me the whole deal? And they said, oh, well, that was a misunderstanding. I was like, this is
or the best one. The best one. We have NDAs. We can't disclose that.
That's another really good one. Yeah. So they had a disinformation campaign, right? And look, the people who made those calls thought that they were doing the right thing, because they live in their own information bubble. That's what they were told to do. But they went to war with us in the press. They tried to disparage us, but we hung together and we stayed away from them for long enough that at the end of that, these giant companies, WME, CAA, UTA, we forced them to sell their production arms. They sold them down to 5%, much lower ownership. And they ended the conflict of interest of packaging. We forced them to do it because they needed us, and they swore they would never do it.
Well, you forced them to do it because they needed you, but it was also a demonstration of when people stick together in this solidarity.
Exactly right.
That regardless of, because you don't have the money that private equity has, just like the Teamsters Union doesn't have the money that Amazon has. However, we're going to win that fight, and we're going to win that fight just like you won your fight against the agents. Strictly sweat equity,
exactly,
and courage and conviction.
That's how you do it, by sticking together. A solidarity is all you have at the end. And having experienced that, it was so powerful to me. I was like, this was such a great victory. I just wanted to be more involved in the union. And so through that process, through that fight, I got more and more involved with leadership, and I was eventually encouraged to run. Our outgoing president, David Goodman, who is a man who I admire so much. He's just such a profound leader to me, and a guy I'm really proud to call him a friend. He encouraged me to run and let me know I would have his support.
So what is the structure of the executive board that you sit on?
So that we have a president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, 3 officers, and then we've got 16 board members who sit for 2 years. And that's pretty much
2-year
it.
terms.
Yep.
And you're elected by the
membership.
Rank and file.
Flat vote. And all unpaid leadership, all volunteer positions. And then when it comes to negotiating, we have a negotiations committee that.
And who picks the negotiating committee?
The officers and board. So, and some of the negotiating committee are people who are serving leadership otherwise, and some are just rank and file members.
So our structure is similar. We have general president, general secretary, treasurer, and we have a regional board set up with vice presidents and everything else. But what separates us from a lot of other unions is we're one member, one vote.
Yeah.
So our members get to vote.
That's us
in
too.
every 5 years, which is great. And we mandate
really important.
And we mandated last convention. We fought hard for this, myself and our general secretary treasurer and our team, when we were trying to take back our union, was that we wanted to be a more transparent but inclusive membership. So we changed our constitution to read that every negotiation, because look, we have 1.3 million members, thousands upon thousands of collective bargaining agreements, that every local and national negotiations have to have rank and file members on the negotiating committee.
Yeah.
And that's important for us because rank and file, true testimonial what happens in the workplace. I mean, we're a big union. We represent everybody from airline pilots to zookeepers. We're just not in one craft. So that has been the best experience, and actually probably has attributed to the majority of the success that we've had. Almost 3 years of new leadership. We're getting the strongest contracts. We've had over 200 strikes nationwide in less than 3 years. And it's been but it's all attributed to the inclusiveness and transparency of the union.
You have to have that. The members need to feel that their will is being expressed through the membership. You're always going to have difference of opinion. There's always going to be some people who say, I don't agree with what leadership's doing.
Or they're going to say, you're too young, wait your turn.
Yeah, absolutely. But they need to feel that it is their struggle. So let's talk about the strike, because I was on, the board negotiating committee during the strike. The way we do that, we do a survey of all of our members. What struggles are you experiencing? We then read literally every single survey. We don't tabulate them. Literally, we go in and read, 5,000, 6,000 surveys. Then we, as a board negotiating committee, get together and talk about what we need. Then we present that to the membership at these big meetings. And we say, here's what we're planning on going to get. And there's some leadership. We say, hey, the pension plan is in trouble, or whatever it may be that year. So we got to go get this specifically. Then the members come up and they tell us what they need. And then when we go into the negotiating room with the companies who we sit across the table from, we say, our members need this. And they have told us that they will not accept a deal that does not include XYZ.
All right, so stop there for a minute.
Yeah.
We did the same thing with UPS, which is the largest collective bargaining agreement in the country.
Damn.
Represents 340,000 members. The difference was we did that whole same process. We may have different terminologies. We got hundreds of thousands of proposals, right?
Yeah.
And we screen them, rank and file with our negotiating committee. And then we go into the meeting with a company that is probably one of the most successful in the world. The difference is we have our members, rank and file members, sitting at that table looking at their employer, their managers, who's never done a day's work like they have done. And when they're giving true testimonials on what we're trying to justify why this needs to change in this contract, very powerful.
We do that exact same thing.
Right, but you're a little different because you are rank and file members that actually work in the craft.
Yes. That's true. Our leadership is literally rank and file members. Right. And we have everybody from showrunners. So on our negotiating committee last time, we had Mike Schur, who's a creator of many, many hit shows. And then we had folks like me. I created one show. And then we have people who are just staff writers, right? Or have other roles. We had, folks who work in late night and said, hey, this is what I face. And then we sit across the table from the lawyers and, bean counters, and we say, this is what we are facing and this is what we need. And
so
we say that directly to
Are
them.
you on the holiday Christmas card, the holiday list, not just Christmas, holiday list of Carol Lombardini?
Lombardini?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
She... After your strike, the Screen Actors strike, and our support of it, I have not received any holiday
cards from her,
or Christmas cards.
I mean, this, Carol is. I don't want to let it get personal. Her job, however, is to be the no machine, right? And she's created. And so there's this organization called the AMPTP. This is this coalition of all the companies that we negotiate against, Sony and Fox and Netflix, and they all get together. And she tells all of them, hey, I'll do all your negotiating for you. And I'm the no machine. All she says is no. She doesn't actually work for the companies directly. She's not trying to make movies. Her only job is to keep their costs down and to say no, 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 no. And to serve as a screen in front of the CEOs, right? And so this was the whole problem with our strike is we're trying to get through to the CEOs and say, hey, David Zaslav, Ted Sarandos, this is what your writers are telling you we need, and we are going to go on strike.
But you got to remember one thing. If you talk about 2007 strike, you weren't dealing with streaming media, so to speak.
Right.
There was a lot of different nuances that you had to face in these negotiations, as far as, especially I think one of the biggest things that you faced was AI. Protecting jobs against AI, protecting the industry. So there were a lot more different dynamics
100%.
And a lot more bigger players at that table. I mean, you had Amazon, you've got Netflix, you've got Hulu, Apple, that weren't there before, right? So that's a whole different dynamic. And then you're dealing with someone who is basically just a gatekeeper, right? That's saying, hey, I understand your struggle. You know, I agree with you. However,
I wish she said that, man.
However, no, but I know she said it off the record to people.
Yeah.
You know, if it was up to me, but I'm not calling the shots. Well, get the shot callers at the table.
Exactly. And that's what it took 5 months to have happen. Like, our whole goal was, hey, we need to get the CEOs in here. Because the thing is, the fact that they have this structure where they team up to negotiate, right? David Zaslav and Ted Sarandos and I don't know, whoever's running it for Apple, right? They hate each other. Right, because they're competitors.
Oh, I would love a scenario like that, because I love negotiating and I love pitting them all against each other.
And that's the table we were trying to.
And I'd be like, I'd typically, if I was doing the negotiations, and you guys did very well, you did awesome, and we have a great representative from the Teamsters, Lindsay Dar, who's one of our vice presidents.
She's amazing, and let me just say, she's a hero to writers. Like writers love Lindsay more than they love.
We always tell people she's the best swearer, if that's a word that we have.
I've never heard a woman say motherfucker more times in a minute than Lindsay.
So, but like I would be, and I remember, you know, being involved in it from, you know, saying, hey, look, you got to drive a wedge between these people. Like, I mean, me personally, I would go by and be like, hey, Sony, you know what that motherfucker said about you? You guys, you know, and that's what you do.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's different, but, you know, you guys go into that. I'm sure people don't understand the process. You knew a year in advance that this was going to be a fight.
Yes.
You knew that, you know, they're going to take you on, because they're going to take you on, Screen Actors next, and then the Teamsters. And what did you do to gear up for that campaign? Because you're looking at all these proposals.
Yeah.
You're hearing the dialogue from the members on what's needed, what needs to change.
Yeah.
And you've got an uphill battle because, you know, the guild doesn't have the deep pockets to take on these corporations, which they are corporations. They're not even creatives anymore.
Yeah.
And then you got to worry about what support you're going to get from the other unions.
Well, so, I mean, look, we prepare, or we do our contract every 3 years. We prepare every 3 years long for that contract every time. That's our big fight. And we, in the Writers Guild, we are the most militant union. We're the union that fights in the old-fashioned way, where we know we have to go on strike every so often, and we're going to use our raw labor power. We're not going to try to cut an easy deal, or, you know, be a teacher's pet kind of union. We're going to fight when we have to. And so we sort of keep a standing army. You know, we are ready to go at any moment. We have a strike fund that we keep full, so that we know if we have to go on strike, we can help our
How big is that strike fund?
I actually don't want to say off the top of my head because I don't have the figure, but it's millions. Right?
So we have a $350 million strike.
Yeah, yours is bigger than ours.
No. What I'm saying,
ours is probably you know, in the tens of millions.
Mine's bigger than yours.
Yeah.
All right, but no, and it's important to have these.
A lot of things about you are bigger than me, Sean.
But, probably not my bank account. I'm the lowest paid general president in the country, which is great. I love it.
I'm unpaid as a board member. I'm making my money on YouTube, same as you.
I'm in the negative. I'll be honest with you. You know, but anyways, you know, it's important to have fun.
Argue about how little money we have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go for it.
But then we're fighting corporate America, right? But you know, the strike fund's important.
Yeah.
Right, and you got to make sure that you have your membership is not compromised financially, that they can take the fight on. I was so astonished at how strong the WGA was when you took that strike out, because there wasn't a question. You know, the one great thing about Teamsters and Teamster contracts, and we have a whole discipline that we negotiate picket line protection language in any and all contracts, or we don't accept them from the subordinate bodies. So we knew that we could help you sustain and win your fight, because not one person in the Teamsters Union was going to cross that picket line.
And you didn't. I mean,
and we never will, as long as I'm there.
Your support for our strike was so critical, and you guys led the way. You know, we got a lot of different unions in Hollywood. We have political, not disagreements, but there's
egos get in the way.
Egos get in the way. It's kind of like different nations. You know, we got our own political structure, we got our own history, and some you're closer with than others. You guys were right there with us from the get-go, and like writers owe such a debt of gratitude to Teamsters and every single writer on our picket line. Like, you guys are heroes to us, and because that solidarity was really so critical to us.
So you fire the first shot across the bow,
Yeah.
going on strike. So basically shuts down the industry. Teams on crossing picket lines, screen actors are not working, and then screen actors, I think 8, 9, 10 weeks later, they pull the plug and they go on strike.
Yeah, and that was the first time they had gone strike in decades and decades.
And so I knew we were heavily involved in it because we're looking at it going, all right, we're up next year. IATSE and the Teamsters are up next.
Yeah.
If WGA and SAG concedes and loses, they're going to come after us hard.
Yeah.
Now, the concern that we had the whole time was the WGA and the Screen Actors Guild, you don't have picket line protection.
Yeah.
In your contracts. So we were concerned, obviously that, look, if we have to go on strike, are they going to support us? And I remember reaching out to the leadership of both respective unions and say, look, if we have to take them out, we got to be creative on how you're not going to go to work.
Yeah.
WGA, right out of the gate, said, what you did for us, supporting our strike, we've got your back 1,000%.
1,000%.
And that was awesome. But I'll tell you, the one thing I loved about your strike, and I came out here for some rallies, and I got to spend some time with Sean Astin and Justine Bateman on the picket lines. And it was funny. Your messaging to the media, flawless.
Oh,
right? Flawless.
Thank
right?
you, man.
And everybody's like, their messaging is great. I go, they write for a fucking living. Why wouldn't it be? Right?
I mean, writers are all, I think it's really funny because every union in Hollywood, the way the union acts matches the job. You know what I mean? Like directors are like, we got it. We're in charge. We're at the top of the totem pole. Actors are kind of like, where do we go? Where do we stand? Okay, is this where we should be? Great, we're on board. Writers, we are assholes and we're ideologues, and we are like, now here's the way the fucking world has got to be, and we lay it out.
You've got a lot of similarities to lawyers.
Yeah.
Right? So I got a funny story about my lawyer who's been with me 30 years, Mike Feinberg. I wrote a letter one time to a company, and it was about a boycott or something else. This is when I was running Local 25. So I sent it to him. I go, make sure it's legal, make sure it doesn't get in his trouble, and make some necessary changes. He makes all the changes and everything, red lines them. A year later, I've got the exact same situation with a different employer. I take his letter that he modified my original letter to, send it to him, and he comes back with all these changes. I'm like, you phony fucking piece of shit. And he's like, what? I'm like, that's the same letter that you changed a year ago, and you changed your own letter back. He goes, hey, my mind changes. I changed my mind. Right? But it's just funny. And I was kidding around when I call him a phony piece of shit. He's a good man. But he does charge me by the sentence.
Language is powerful, and it changes based on what the.
So what was the big fight over at the WGA, just so people understand what the struggle was and why you went out on strike?
There's a couple things. There's AI, which I think is a separate topic. The big change was in the shift to streaming, the companies had changed how the business works. They had exploited loopholes in our contract to employ us for less time, right? Without getting too much into the details of the contract, they were hiring less writers for shorter periods of time, but asking for the same amount of work.
So they wanted you to do more with less time.
Exactly.
They were pay.
Exactly. And they were cutting us out of parts of the business. For instance, writers going to set, which is a really important part of the television process. People misunderstand television.
Well, that was a concern during the strike for us, and a question, not even a concern, but more of a question. I said, look, a lot of these writers, especially coming out of the pandemic, every industry in the world was working remotely.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, how do you know some of these writers aren't working when they're in their own confinements of their own homes? Because, like, how do you police that?
Well, we do police it, and we have a committee that like looks for incidents of scabbing, right? Which we take really seriously. But if people are writing, like the thing that people cannot do is write for an employer, right? They cannot correspond with an employer. And, you know, if a writer wants to get paid, they got to put their name on the script and they have to send it into the employer, and there's got to be a date attached.
So
to that.
there's gonna be a way to track that.
Exactly right. And so, you know, if someone is like, I don't know, they're on strike and they're like, I'm going to write my novel or my play or my screenplay, right? Like that's not something that anybody can police, but that's also like, that's work on your own time. You know what I mean? That like, hopefully you can sell to somebody later, whatever. But in terms of actually working for an employer, that's not something you do alone in your home, right? That's something where you have to talk to the employer. They're going to give you notes. You got to go back and forth. You have to pitch them and they say, okay, I like the idea. I'm going to pay you for it. Writing is not, in fact, a solitary, you know, experience of someone, you know, just putting words in.
It's a creative collaboration.
It's a creative collaboration, right? And it extends through the entire process. So in television especially, writers don't just, you know, work in a writer's room and then write the script. They go to set because someone said, you know, someone has to look at the monitor and go, oh, hold on a second, that's not what was in the
So
script.
they were trying to limit you
exactly
going to set. And why? Like, what benefit would that have to them?
Because we have union rates for that work and they would rather not pay it and they don't think they have to, you know. But it was the same thing for post, right? Where, you know, the writer goes in and, you know, okay, hold on a second. This episode's running 3 minutes long. We got to cut some of the scenes, but wait, then it won't make sense. So we need someone to write a new line of dialogue for the actor to come in and record in voiceover, you know, that we'll put in one of the scenes where we're looking at them from the back. That sort of thing happens in every single show, right? But they were A, trying to cut us out of that process, and B, trying to pay writers less than scale for that. And we needed to put protections in place against that. Like basically the companies had tried to restructure our our workflow, right? Similar in a factory. Oh, what if we move the assembly line around and then we don't, you know, we'll retitle this job and we'll have this person go over there. And if we change it this way, then we can save some money. We don't have to pay the writers as much.
Right.
And we, in response to them doing that, we had to put new protections in place to say, no. When you want a writer to do this work, it has to be for a minimum of this period of time. You have to have this many writers if you want this much work done. Just basic stuff that every union fights for.
Basic protections.
Basic protections, yeah. And a lot of those were things that they said, well, you've never had this kind of protection before. We're never going to give you this. And we'd say, well, you have this kind of protection for other jobs, right? You have this kind of protection, you know.
You have the Teamsters, you have other
Exactly
unions.
right. And they said, no, we'll never do it. We'll never consider it. And we said, well, our writers demand it. And if you don't do it, then we're going to go on strike, or, you know, we're going to take a strike vote anyway. And they
So that was one of the biggest issues.
Yep.
AI.
Yep.
And the limiting of, they wanted you to do more work for less.
Exactly.
Right. What was some of the other issues?
Let's see. There are a lot of long-standing, inequities that we were trying to ameliorate. For instance, staff writers, which is the lowest role in a TV room, didn't receive for many, many years. Did not receive script fees for writing scripts. We were able to like get that put in place. Script fees for staff writers. I'm trying to think what else. There were like a guaranteed second step for screenwriters.
So every person that's covered under that collective bargaining agreement, where they are in the pecking order, all had improvements in that agreement.
100%. That's really important. We have television writers, we have screenwriters who write for features, and then we have writers who are more like me. We call those comedy variety writers, people who write for late night and that sort of show. All those groups have different things that they needed. We had to get wins for all those groups, and we were able to deliver them, and it's really important. And that was why it was really important to me to be in the negotiating room, because I was like, I'm the only writer of my type who is going to be in that room from the Writers Guild West. And so I want to be able to speak for the people that I work with and say, no, this is what we need. And that's what you're talking about having rank and file members.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Because look, you know, a lot of times prior to, and I've never practiced this, I've always, even before it was mandated by our union, whenever I went to any and all negotiations, I would have rank and file members at the negotiating table with me, because I know I know how to negotiate a contract, but we don't always know exactly what people go through when they're at work performing their jobs. We don't know, you know, some of the stuff that we may take for granted that, hey, it's not that important, but it may be the most important thing to that group as a whole. Yeah. And there's no better spokespeople for that than the rank and file members having that dialogue. And you know what I love about it the most is, you know, you've got these employers and most of them, you know, have never done a fucking day's work in their life. You know, they get this big education, big ideas, and they're book smart, world dumb.
Yeah.
There's nothing better than when you have rank and file members telling them how fucked up they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
And telling them like, you rely on me to make your product and you don't know how I do it.
Right.
You don't actually understand my job. So let me tell you for a second about what I do, you know?
So you basically, this 3-year agreement is probably the best agreement that with protections in it. And look, I do it all the time because, you know, we negotiate a historic UPS agreement, largest in the country, biggest settlement ever for our members. We took care of every single person in there, and every member was represented improvements. We had 60 non-economic improvements, largest financial package ever with 0 concessions. But probably like myself, I'm sure you do the same, is after it's all said and done, I start thinking about what do we need after this contract expires, the next day after it's ratified. What didn't we get for our members?
Yeah.
What should we have focused on harder? If you look back at those negotiations and that strike, which was very inspiring to us, but also I believe the industry as well.
Yeah.
What do you think you could have done better, and what are you going to focus on in the next round of negotiations?
That's a really great question. Look, you always leave stuff on the table. There's a moment in the negotiating room, and you know, I'm a sort of junior member of the negotiating committee, so you know, I'm sitting there.
Number one in our hearts, though.
Thank you. But I'm fighting, you know, I'm doing my best. I'm saying, here's what's important to me. You know, one of the last rounds, you know, you hear there's the folks who go into the smaller room and then they come back and report to us on the negotiating committee, right? And they say, hey, we're not able to get this one thing. And you go, fuck, I really wanted that for the members. They really, really wanted it. You know, they deserve it. They should have it, right? And then you look at all the things that you won and you say, okay, this is a big win for us, right? This is the biggest win that we've ever had. We're going to live to fight another day. And we won this stuff with strength, right? So there's always more that you want. But that's the job of the union, is to claw and get as much as we can.
So it's funny, when we were wrapping up the UPS agreement, we threatened to strike, broke off negotiations, did like 2.5 weeks of practice picketing all over the country. I was doing all kinds of media, and we finally get the company to where we needed them, and we finally got the deal that we needed to get to bring back to our members, which was ratified by 86% of the rank and file members. One person in the negotiation team, who is a West Coast person, grabs me aside, and he's like, hey, I got to talk to you. It was like a drug deal. And I'm like, what? Like, I got 5 million things going on in my head trying to satisfy every need, and we're like an inch away from going over the goal line. And he's like, I love everything in the contract. We got pension improvements, healthcare is taken care of. We took care of the most important people, the part-timers. He's going through it. And he's basically, I'm like, all right, you know, he's going to give me a compliment maybe. He says, but I think, you know what your defining moment will be in these negotiations? I said, what? He goes, if you could get brown socks for everybody. I went like this. Let me see what I can do. I just shook my head and I'm like, all right, let's get rid of the crazy. Let's just focus on what needs to get done. So
yeah, your list could be as long as possible, but your goal is to get the stuff that's most.
Well, we got to get the best deal possible.
Yeah.
Put in the most protections, and you know, and the one thing I tell everybody, my team and rank and file members, is that look, we can brag about all our victories, but we also have to talk about our shortfalls and shortcomings.
Absolutely.
And learn from that. And that's one thing that I think is important in any and all negotiations. And look, we're negotiating contracts, hopefully to attract new members to organize,
yeah,
to expand the industry, show how important we are to whatever industry we're representing. And I think you've done a tremendous job from the WGA perspective. And look, I think the one thing politically, and I don't really want to get into politics, I'm actually sick of talking about politics, but I know one of our focus and one of our initiatives, especially under this new administration where opinions are all over the place on this, but I think we need to focus on making sure that we keep motion pictures, streaming media, anything that's covered under the Hollywood umbrella in the United States.
As much as we can, you know, it's a real difficult problem because we used to sort of have in Hollywood, you know, a natural monopoly because it's a very expensive industry and this is where it's all centered, you know, and the entertainment industry has gone global. It's gone across the country, but the talent pool is still, in the United States and in California. And like one of our big focuses now is making sure that we can keep, the entertainment industry here, and so that the people who, the talent pool that's been built up can continue making these.
And how do we do that? Do we put tariffs on these countries, or do we?
I mean,
or do we actually just come up with a plan and an ultimatum?
Yeah.
For these companies that they need to shoot they've got an American workforce, and the problem is it's such an industry that I always say to people, look, it's not, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, it's not a loyal industry. It's like a carnival. It's a moving industry. They can move from one location to the next. I mean, we shot a movie in Boston in 2011. I negotiated the contract. I think it was a Pink Panther 2. Now, have you been to Boston?
I was just there last week.
There was a great
I did a show at the Wilbur.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
All Teamsters, by the way.
And that
had I known you were there, I would have went to your show instead of Nikki Glaze's.
Well, Nikki's a tougher ticket than me. She's wonderful, but yeah, I mean, I love working at a theater.
I would have put up a picket line to see if you'd cross it.
Looking at the camera.
But anyways, I just lost my train of thought for a second here. What were we talking
Boston
about?
movie, Boston.
Boston movie. We're making the Pink Panther 2. And they say, we really want to do it in Boston. You have a great tax incentive here. Sony Productions, who we have a good relationship with. We want to do it in Boston. We love the Teamsters and everything else. You worked hard to get the incentive here. And I said, all right, yeah, what's the setting? It's like Paris, France. I'm like, well, where are you going to do this? They're like, Chelsea, Mass. I'm like, Chelsea, Mass? Like, Chelsea is a great, hardworking community.
Yeah.
It's, it's very diverse. But I'm like, Chelsea's never going to look like fucking Paris. Sure. Give it your best shot. Right. And of course they made it look like,
I mean, locations.
It's amazing what they can do. So my point to all this is they can make movies, make anything look like anywhere.
I think what the problem that Hollywood has is the same problem the rest of our economy has, which is the corporate race to the bottom, right? These companies, I don't know why we've got this attitude of we have to cut everything. Everything has to be as cheap as possible. When we're the richest country in the world, stock market's been going up continuously.
But we've got the most talent in the world.
And we have the most talent in the world. And yet they're trying to cut costs and like, oh, let's just, shoot it on a green screen and then send it to Korea to have them, do CGI. Whereas, it used to be that you could, film it on a set here in Los Angeles or, Atlanta or somewhere else in the States, right? A big part of the problem is we've allowed this corporate culture of merger and acquisition and layoff and cost cutting to infect every single part of the American economy. The reason my first show, Adam Ruins Everything, was canceled was because Time Warner merged with AT&T. They laid off my entire network, True TV, right? Then later, Time Warner.
They tried to make you feel. They tried to make you feel good about it, didn't they?
Yeah, they're absolutely there. Oh no, we're just some efficiencies. You know what I mean?
I mean, we fight mergers we fight mergers more than anybody, especially in the grocery industry. We fight them all over the country. But that's again leads to another conversation. As far as look, we need to keep productions, we need to keep Hollywood in America.
Yes.
But we also need to formulate a plan for monopolization of industries and protect jobs, create jobs as a result of it. And I think the only way we're going to do this is collaborating with one another.
Yeah.
And, forget who's in power, forget who's not in power, forget who the Senate is, forget who the Congress is, and actually have credible arguments and credible testimonials of how great this industry could be.
Yeah.
Without doing it with less people, without imposing technology that's not needed, and basically not allowing billionaires that run these studios and these private equity funds to keep making money while other people are losing jobs and losing.
I think that's a real. We need to have collaboration on it, and our solidarity is always going to be the most important thing. I do think though that we don't pay enough attention to in politics. We focus so much on the presidency and on the Senate and the House. But we miss what is happening like deeper behind the scenes. And look, I have a lot of problems with the Biden administration. I have a lot of problems with the Democrats. But what we saw for just 4 years was for the first time, they started going after these mergers, right? You had Lena Khan at the FTC.
Lena Khan was awesome.
Awesome. They're fucking bruisers. And if you look at what David Zaslav from Warner Brothers said, right? he, in the run-up to the election, he was like, we need to unlock the ability for us to keep doing mergers because that's what we do. He literally sees his job as doing as many mergers as possible, as buying and selling us, right? The worker and the consumer. And we, for the first time, had a consensus, or we had people in this country who were working to stop that, who were saying, no, we're going to take a look at that merger and see, is it really going to be good for the country, or are you just trying to fire more people? And the moment we started to push back, these CEOs said, "No, we'll just take over the country. We'll just, actually, let's run things. Let's have, let's fire all those people. Let's end all those protections."
Right.
And that's going to set us back years.
But you saw the evolution of the Democratic parties. Those same billionaires that, once were supporting a strictly Republican campaign, you saw a lot of those big technology Democrats, technology Silicon Valley, right? They were endorsing the Harris-Walz campaign. Those are the people that I have a problem with. We can fight the mergers all day long. We do that every single day. When you start embracing billionaires that are trying to create technology to destroy jobs, and that's what the Democrats did. I mean, they had Uber, they had Lyft, they had Google. Those are all the big players. So forget the party, Democrat or Republican. I think instead of throwing bombs at each side, let's point out the deficiencies like we do amongst ourselves, like we do in our rank and file, and say, this is why this technology is no good. This is why this acquisition and merger shouldn't happen. And if we're throwing bombs, there's just going to be a line in the sand drawn where we're not going to get anything done.
I agree with you. And my main allegiance is against billionaires, right? And for workers. That's my main political orientation right now.
There's no denying the fact of who we represent and who we are beholden to. I'm beholden to working people, working families, beholden to the labor movement, and making sure that everybody's protecting. We're creating jobs and we're creating opportunity for people. There's going to be billionaires. There's always going to be billionaires. But I think our goal is to make sure they understand why they're billionaires and who made them billionaires.
Yeah. But what you saw, I mean, look, I completely agree with you. The Democratic Party has been too beholden to a lot of billionaires for a long time. And I think they should understand that no billionaire is the friend of working people. But you also saw in the last election a huge number of billionaires swing to the Republican Party because they said, oh, hold on a second. Mark Andreessen and these guys, right, and all the tech billionaires. For the first time, you had Lena Khan pushing back against them. And they said, oh, we can't have this. Let's take over the government. And now, what's happening in Washington right now, where we have a billionaire running the country and laying off tens of thousands of workers, union members, who look, I do an entire show about the federal workforce. These are hardworking people.
Yeah, we don't want to see anybody lose their jobs. I mean, it's like any administration. When I came in to take over the Teamsters Union, you take a look at what's necessary, where we're strong, where we're weak, and you staff up accordingly. And there's a big push going on, and we don't want to see anybody lose their jobs. Coming out of a union with us, 1.3 million, we face layoffs every single day. We face corporate greed where people bankrupt good companies, right? Scourge all the assets, and people left holding the bag. And, we sometimes fight this battle on our own. No one wants to hear it. No one wants to see it because it's not affecting them. And, I think the courts just stopped some of those layoffs, though, I believe.
Sort of. I mean, they're saying you have to halt them, but Elon's locking the doors and taking people's computers away and saying don't show up regardless of what the court says, and causing havoc for these people.
I think the first 100 days are going to be, they haven't been subtle, that's for sure. So I think on the 101st day.
They just laid off thousands of weather scientists who are, these really dedicated civil servants who just want to help us understand the weather.
Actually, I just watched your G series,
the G word
on Netflix, yeah. And you enlightened me on how the weather meteorologists actually work.
Yeah, I mean the weather system, and this, just because it happened literally yesterday, every weather report you get in this country, which human life depends upon, right? Every plane you fly, every food you eat, all of it depends on getting an accurate weather report, has been provided for 100 years by the federal government, by the National Weather Service, which is these meteorologists, and they make these readings that no private company has anywhere close to the capacity to give, and they provide it free to literally everyone. And Elon just laid off thousands of the scientists who do that. They're trying to dismantle NOAA, the agency that does it.
But you did this documentary in 2022, and I think one of the the weather series or the weather episode, you said the federal government, and this was 2022, didn't tell people there was a tornado coming, right? Wasn't that one of them?
No, it was that AccuWeather, the private company.
The private company
had so AccuWeather has a few capabilities that they've added on, right, to the National Weather Service data, but you have to pay for that service. And so there was an incident where AccuWeather had tracked a tornado that was coming for a particular community, but unless you were a paying member of their service, you didn't receive the warning.
Right.
That's the difference between what the federal government does and what a private company does.
So in that same series, you did a great, I think the first episode was on food, FDA, and everything else, where there's a lot of preservatives and everything else. What's your feelings on RFK as the Health and Human Service?
Well, what was my opinion on his feelings? I mean, the man is simply insane. He has a conspiratorial worldview that is fundamentally anti-science. I mean, he believes the vaccines are bad for people when vaccines are one of the greatest health advances in human history.
But is he wrong? Is he wrong about the preservatives in food?
I mean, I don't know what exact claims he's made about specific preservatives in food. The American food system has a huge number of problems and is has a lot of blame for Americans' health problems. If we had a Secretary of Health and Human Services who believed in science, right, and wasn't a science denialist and also cared about preservatives in food, I would be all for that.
I'll tell you one thing. If you followed in your parents' and your sister's footsteps, I would have named you.
Thank you.
Let me ask you this question.
Compliment.
I've got one real serious question,
Sure, please.
and I hope you answer it truthfully and honestly.
I will.
Is your name going to appear on the Epstein list?
It will not.
Are you disappointed about that?
I was not even really aware of who Jeffrey Epstein was when he died, and I have not really followed it closely. I've not been close to that at all. I think that is such a distraction that they put in front of us to make the problem with the conspiratorial.
You think it's a diversion?
Yeah, I mean, people focus on these fake conspiracies. I mean, I don't. The guy was a bad guy.
Listen,
right?
you answered the question. I'm just concerned about you.
The actual corporate conspiracies that are, I've sort of spent my career talking about are happening out in the open, and they're matters of power, right? And stuff about sexual abuse on a plane, hey, very bad. But they throw this stuff out as catnip in order to distract us.
It's extremely bad, and it's actually embarrassing that it's getting the attention it does. Those people should have never been allowed to do what they've done.
Yeah, and
they should pay the price. But what is the future for Adam Conover?
I've really carved an interesting row for myself in that I'm a comedian. Comedy's supposed to be fun. I've also, stepped into this role of working in labor, getting to talk to people such as yourself, getting involved in politics. And so I'm traveling around the country doing comedy right now. And my comedy is, I talk a little bit about politics. I talk a lot about sex and dating because that's something that I'm interested in now.
Are you good at it?
Comedy's about good at sex. I get pretty good reviews, honestly. I've been doing okay. You just want like this.
I've been doing good.
I've been doing okay.
That would be a problem for me. See that one over there? And that would be a major problem, but I appreciate it.
I think that the labor movement in America we have fallen asleep in a lot of ways. I think as critical as you are the Democrats, and I agree with your criticism.
And I'm a Democrat.
Yeah.
And I am critical of some Republicans as well.
I'm critical of all of them. I think that the labor movement itself, we need to take a hard look at ourselves and look at the ways in which I'm talking about unions I'm a member of, but also other unions, have been complacent and have played ball with the Democrats.
Well, I think
let's just rely on the legislators to help us out. Yeah, let's not use member power, right? And the reason I love the Teamsters and the reason I'm so proud to be a Writers Guild member is we are the type of union that uses member power. We organize. We go on strike when we have to, and we try to organize new work. And you guys organize a ton of.
So
new
this is our saying. We organize, we mobilize, and then we pulverize.
That's exactly how you have to do it. And so many unions have forgotten how to do that. One of the reasons I was so proud of SAG-AFTRA, because SAG-AFTRA was the type of union for many years that forgot how to organize, right? That said, oh, we talked to Sacramento, we talked to Gavin Newsom, we asked nicely.
Gavin Newsom.
And we have, don't even get me started.
No, I'll get you started. You know why? He's a plagiarist.
Yeah?
Yeah, he all of a sudden started a podcast like I did, right? And one of my opening when we did the first, I think, bit, I said we're gonna have unscripted dialogue. This fool does the same exact thing. We should sue him for copyright. Seriously. Get our team of lawyers. Get the dream team out here. We're ready to go. No, but I got to tell you, like, this guy doesn't have an original thought in his head. I don't want to get into him.
No, let's move on. From
Yeah. Because listen, honestly, he's a joker. When you are saying, when you're in office because of labor,
yeah,
and you don't support, autonomous commercial vehicles having a human operator, where you don't support, labor people that are there.
Yep.
And your first line when you have bipartisan legislation to protect jobs, protect against automation, his first thing is he vetoes it.
Yeah.
Like, you should run. You should quit.
I mean, we need to stop relying on.
Let's boycott his podcast.
I agree with you. Okay. I'm not going to listen to his fucking podcast.
I don't even listen to him.
I just wanted to give some flowers to SAG-AFTRA, right? Because they showed up and they went on strike for the first time in decades,
right.
And they won a bigger contract than they ever have in the past because they started organizing again. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's incumbent upon the labor movement to stop hanging back, right? And to stop relying on the laws and organize new work. That's something that I think the Writers Guild could do a lot more of, and that the SAG-AFTRA should as well. If we want to make sure that people are treated well in the entertainment industry, we need to organize reality shows. We need to organize YouTube. Right. We need to organize like all these other forms of media so that the workers in them can be in solidarity with us.
So I got a funny story about, and this will be hilarious. Reality TV, probably MTV, The Real World was like my first introduction to what reality TV was way back when. So my father was a transportation coordinator for the Teamsters Union. Just rank and file like a set boss, right? So oftentimes you'd see like a non-union production try and sneak into Boston. You'd go over there, find out who the producer is, and, get a few guys on. So I'm negotiating all the contracts in the motion picture industry as a business agent. So my father calls me up one day. They're shooting a movie on Boylston Street in Boston. And I'm like, all right, Big Bill, relax. We'll go. No, they are. I'm like, I'll take a look at it. I go over. I don't see anything. I see like 2 or 3 film trucks. He goes over the next day and he gets the producer and he's like, hey, and the kid's probably about 25 years old, right? And says, you're shooting a movie here? And the kid goes, no, sir. He's like, well, you got film trucks, you got cameras, blah, blah, blah. Who's driving these trucks? Whatever. He goes, it's not a movie, sir. It's the real world. My father goes, that's fucking right. It's the real world. And you're going to put Teamsters on it, right? So he calls me up and he's like, this fresh little bastard gave me all kinds of lip. He's told me that we're filming a motion picture. And he told me this is the real world. I told him what the real world was. I go, Dad, it's a fucking MTV series. He goes, what the fuck's MTV? So listen, I want to thank you very much. Sure.
I just want to ask you one question straight up, Sean. Is that okay? And I don't ask you this to be confrontational, but I want to get your view on it because I've heard you talk about politics a lot. I watched you on Tucker Carlson. I thought you were great on that show, and I think you're right about everything that you say about the Democrats. And also when Trump got in there at first, I know that you had a little bit of influence over maybe that labor secretary pick, and I was like, that's pretty cool. I know that Republicans are having a little bit of a realignment where some of them are being a lot more worker friendly, and I've talked to some of them. But I also, and I don't have an allegiance to the Democrats. I don't think we should be stuck with them. But when I look at just the specific agencies that work with the labor movement, right? The Department of Labor, the NLRB has no quorum now because they fired, the head, and God knows what it's going to be like for the next 4 years. As a Writers Guild member, I'm like, that affects our organizing. That affects our strike next time. When I look at, the Labor Department that nominee said she doesn't support the PRO Act and she supports, these states allowing workers to freeload, not pay their dues, even though they
That's
benefit
not what
from
she
a
said.
union contract.
I was there. That is
Okay.
not what she said. And I'll tell you this. It's a great.
I'm
It's a
just
great.
curious about those specific things that
great
affect
great
how
question.
you think about them.
Great question, because oftentimes people take things out of context. Okay, so first off, I'll address NLRB. Now, we represent 1.3 million members in everything from airline pilots to zookeepers and everything in between. And the NLRB, now keep in mind that over the last 16 out of the last 20 years, it was a Democratic controlled organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the NLRB, and we organize every day, we organized 75,000 members in the last almost 3 years. And most of that time was under the Democratic leadership. We avoid the NLRB because it's an antiquated system where you can't get results. Now, it's very important if it's utilized in the right way, and it's effective if it is. But to get any type of timely resolution, it doesn't happen. And a lot of times we've gotten bad rulings, even from administrations that were friendly to us in charge. That whole system needs to be revamped, and hopefully that can happen. And we have a seat at the table to do that, where we can get, timely elections, where we can get, quick resolutions. And it hasn't happened. It hasn't happened over the last 20 years. If you see what we did at Amazon, where we struck them in Christmas, we're not organizing through the NLRB, although we did get a good decision as far as joint employer, but it was such an egregious violation. Any administration in control, that board would have ruled our way. But it's an antiquated system that needs to be revamped. Now, we organize every day, and we strike for recognition, and we work neutrality out. Now, we were very instrumental in getting Laurie Chavez de Rima the nomination. I went down and lobbied hard to get her there, because you know what? I sat on a lot of labor management panels over the last 2 years because of the success we had in negotiating that UPS agreement, and I sat with my enemies. When I say my enemies, I sat with the union busting law firms of Jackson Lewis. I sat with Jones Day. I've sat with Morgan Lewis Bacchus, who isn't as bad as the most. And I sat with people that had their intentions of busting unions. And we would have dialogue back and forth. I was in Montana, where the undersecretary of labor, who was a card-carrying union buster, said, I hope Trump gets in because I'm going to be the Secretary of Labor. And I'm saying, over my dead body. And so we had the ability. Trump won the election. Teamsters didn't make an endorsement. We didn't make an endorsement. But we were able to influence the best choice for labor. Now, she signed on to the PRO Act in its form, right? And that PRO Act basically eliminated the right to work states, right? That would have to be right to work states. Now, there's 27 states that are right to work. I hate right to work. I don't think right to work.
We should call it right to be a freeloader.
Well, here's the thing, and I explain this to people. If I'm driving home from work, okay, and I get a flat tire on my car, and I call AAA, and I'm not a member, should they come out and fix my tire? And they'll say, no, you're not a member.
Yeah.
Right? So the same analogy should be used in organized labor.
Agreed.
See, people pick and choose conversations, sound bites out of conversations where they want to run. Now, the PRO Act, don't forget, let's do a little history here. 2008, 2009, we had a Democratic House, Democratic Senate, and a Democratic president.
Oh, I know where you're going,
Okay,
man.
so we had something called the Employee Free Choice Act. Okay, we couldn't get that passed under that whole
And this was
Democratic Party.
this was
That
Barack
a full-
Obama breaking a campaign promise.
Right, breaking a campaign promise, right? So then the PRO Act evolves under the Biden administration, right? The Bernie Sanders of the world and all them, which is a great piece of legislation.
Yeah.
But it was never introduced, right?
Yeah.
Never voted on. And it wasn't going to pass because of, stuff that wasn't realistic that we were going to gain. So our approach to it now is we've got a Secretary of Labor who hopefully will get confirmed and I was at that hearing where she said, do you support the PRO Act, the right to work provision in that PRO Act? And she said, no, I was a sponsor. We never got to vote on it. And people took that, she's for right to work. She's not for right to work. We're trying to get a PRO Act that's going to pass, that's going to make organizing easier, that's going to stop retribution and retaliation against people that want to organize, get a process where a first contract is achieved in a certain time period. If it can't be, there's binding arbitration. Now, As far as right to work goes, we fight that every day. We just beat it back in New Hampshire 3 weeks ago. And, it's all well and good to have legislation that protects it.
Yeah.
But if we're not going to get it, let's come up with a plan to fight it in each and every state, like we did in Michigan, where Michigan voted for right to work, and we're able, under the right leadership, under the governor that's currently there, Gretchen Whitmer, we were able to reverse that right to work, okay, and get rid of that legislation. So if we can't get it in legislation, that doesn't mean Laurie has conceded to support right to work or anything else. It just means we've got to find another venue to go after and fight it. It's been around for a long time.
Well, I think she did say that she supported the right of states to
she said
something like that.
She said what she said was, look, every state's different, right? And that if people, that's a fight that should be on a state level, not on a federal level.
Well, I worry about that being like a retreat for us as a labor movement, but I hope you're right? And I know you're fighting for the right thing.
100%.
And that you do so in a way that fits your members and what you're elected to do. I worry that as a labor movement, here's my commitment, like as a unionist, is that I think that unions have been allied with the Democratic Party for far too long and have allowed the Democratic Party.
We have not got it. We have not got a return on our investment.
We need to go back to remembering that our only source of power is organizing our members and organizing new members and doing it as muscularly as possible. And I think it's the responsibility of every unionist, every union member, every union in the country to do that. And it's one of the reasons that I'm so proud, that we're in kinship with the Teamsters.
We're going to be best friends, you and I.
We're going to be best friends. And you're only going to kick my ass once a year.
No way.
But I also think that we got to be clear-eyed.
We're the new Teamsters. We hug. We hug.
It's a terrifying rib crushing hug.
No.
I think we got to be clear-eyed about when the party, when not the party, but the people in power currently are actively trying to make it harder for us to organize via the NLRB, the Labor Department, and what they're doing at the FTC. Their goal is to let mergers run amok. That is the goal. And
that's why people like you and I, regardless of our feelings about anything, if something's not right, regardless of who we're friends with or not friends with, or who we support, we don't support, we've got to stand up and do what's right and fight. And I think a couple things, just if I may follow up real quick. Republicans have a great opportunity because they made a lot of promises on with how they wanted to be the working party's people. They've got an opportunity to prove it now, right? And some of the stuff they're doing,
they've started by firing tens of thousands of our workers, right? Of union members.
There's no doubt, but the reality of it is, look, people are going to blow things up and hopefully rebuild them. I don't want to see anybody losing their jobs, right? And unfortunately, if there's people being unjustly terminated, there's a process to fight that. My concern with the whole system of Republicans and Democrats is they need to focus on why they are there and who they actually work for. And they work for the constituents, which many of them are our members.
Yeah.
And that's who they need to serve.
I agree with you about that. I think that.
So did you ever hear of yellow freight?
Let me respond. I want to know what it is, but let me just respond quickly. Is that I think that we, as a labor movement, need to be really, really clear about our only strength is solidarity, right? Is solidarity with other workers, just like Teamsters and writers standing together. We need to be standing together with all workers. And I think we as a labor movement need to say the fact that tens of thousands of federal workers, some union members, some not, even the ones who are probationary employees, they're firing them in order of who they can fire fastest, right? They don't give a shit what they do. If you look at some of the testimonies from some of those federal workers, I love my country, I love my job, I know what I do, I'm helping people, they fired me for no reason. It's a sin to fire people like that. Same thing with DEI, right? This attack on DEI is an attack on workers of color, right? It's saying workers of color shouldn't have fairness. And one of the great failings of the labor movement in the 40s and earlier was we allowed the people in power to use race to divide us, right? If you look at the history of the labor movement, one of the great sins.
But that's the best thing about unions, especially
we have to fight against that.
Especially about the Teamsters Union. We have been fighting all these social issues since 1903.
Yeah.
We fight for wage equality. We fight for workers' rights, regardless if you're black, brown, yellow. We've been doing that since 1903. We're going to continue to do that. A lot of these issues are very important to all of us, right? I get it. But let's roll back, and I just want to make one thing clear.
Yeah.
2020, we had 19,000 people, 3,500 Teamsters working on Keystone pipelines, right? And one felt swoop of a pen, all those jobs went away, right? Stopped production, people lost their jobs. And no one wanted to talk about that back then, even though we supported the Democrats. We had 17 to 19,000 people working that lost their jobs in one day. And not one person said a word about it. Even us. I mean, I wasn't in power, the general president of Teamsters at the time. Didn't criticize or didn't fight for those jobs. But my point to all this is, regardless if you're a federal employee, regardless if you work on pipelines, regardless if you work in any industry, we don't want to see anybody losing their jobs. And that's why there should be an ability to have dialogue and conversations on why people shouldn't lose their job, justify. Look, and I think everybody should look at it like, hey, how do I run my household? I run my household, on what I need, what I can survive and afford on. Are some of the moves that are being made right now extreme? Absolutely. But there's always a mechanism to fight against those moves. And look, the federal union's strong. They're going to fight hard on behalf of their members.
I hope so.
And hopefully everybody has their job. But at the end of the day, the only way we're going to get a lot of these issues resolved is to work and fight together. And I got to tell you, I've been in the labor movement 35 years. And I think the last 2 or 3 years have been nothing short of inspiring when you have unions like the WGA, when you have the SGA and the Teamsters and IATSE all working together and focused. That should be something that should be done nationwide. And unfortunately, sometimes just life itself, people don't engage in fights because they don't directly involve them.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's where we need to focus on enlightening people. Look, this fight today may not be yours, but it certainly could be yours tomorrow. And you're going to need our support.
I agree. And that's why, when I see what's happening in DC, I'm like, they're coming for all of us. When they're coming for Black people, they're coming for gay people, they're coming for the federal workforce. That means they're coming for me too. In addition to the ways that they're, the way the changes at the agencies have actually affected, just the Writers Guild or the work that I do. Because there's, David Zaslav's going to have a spree, right?
Only if you allow him to have a spree. Look.
But the way that we tried to stop him was by getting, antitrust enforcement in there. We have to have some help on the federal level.
But listen, number one thing, like, we can point fingers at anybody and everybody, whether you're a Republican or Democrat, going back 30 to 40 years, has some sort of fault in bankruptcy reform.
Absolutely.
In monopolization, in, the attack on workers. I mean, this has been going on for 50 years, and we can look back and I can point to examples like Joe Biden, one of the most pro-union presidents ever. I can't deny that. Okay. First day in office, shuts down a pipeline. We don't say anything. 17,000 jobs, 19,000 jobs gone. Okay. But he does pass legislation that fixes pension funds across the country.
That also fixed the Writers Guild pension funds.
Right.
Yeah.
But ask yourself, who created that problem?
I heard you talk about this on Tucker Carlson. It was created by them.
Problem,
yeah,
right.
Sure.
So it's like, look, we can have all these great debates and dialogue about it, but let's focus on what needs to happen moving forward.
I absolutely, and I don't think that we should be trying to. It's not about trying to pick who's been slightly less shitty, right? Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah, they've all equally fucked us over the years.
I don't know if it's been equal personally, but what is happening right now? They're setting fire, right? And they're setting fire to, like, literally just what's happening right now, and they're setting fire to working people, and we are going to allow ourselves as a labor movement. I don't want to see us allow ourselves to be tricked again. You said we've been fighting since 1903. That's been true, except the Teamsters. Okay, excuse me. The Teamsters have been. Mm-hmm. I don't know the Teamsters exact history on this, but just in terms of race, right? Mm-hmm. The labor movement, large portions allowed ourselves to be divided by racism, right? By saying, oh, you don't want to really be a strong union because then they'd let the Black people in, like that's something that we've allowed to have happen. We've also had unions that have allowed corporate influence to get too powerful and say, oh, let's just cut a deal with the bosses, right? Like the problem that the labor movement has is that we so often make concessions to people who actually do not have workers' interests at heart, and we compromise.
Well,
with
we
them.
shouldn't make
it's
concessions.
led us down a bad path time and time again.
No one should make concessions on anything, especially this day and age, especially when you're down with employers that, to your point, are billionaires and everything else. But again, you've got to take a hard look, and I do it every day. A hard look in the mirror on what my goals and missions are, because of the people giving me the opportunity to represent them.
Yeah.
And, I can tell you right now, we don't care if you're white, black, green, purple, red. What we care about is that we're providing opportunity, representing you properly, and make certain that we're leaving this organization better than we found it.
Yeah. That's my goal as well as a member of union leadership, and it's up to each union is a nation unto itself, right? And we're in leadership because our memberships put us there, and we're fighting for them and what they need. You asked me what my future is. I'm trying to. We just need so much, I think, leadership in our union. We need to be in our movement. We need to be.
I think it's going to be less talk and more action.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. I mean, everything we're talking about here sounds great and everything's awesome. I've had 200 strikes since March of 2022 in various different industries, and the same people that we always fight for and with and side by side. If we're going to truly be unified and have solidarity and a call to arms, it's got to be reciprocated regardless of personal failings or political affiliations.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we got to start to focus as a labor movement, so that we can push back on a lot of those issues and a lot of those moves that are being made right now, where we, again, don't worry about what people feel about us or say about us. But more importantly, if we're going to fight together, we can't pick and choose what battles we want to jump in the middle of and not jump in the middle of.
I agree with you entirely. We have to stand up for each other. And that's why, I'm so proud to be a member of the Writers Guild, because we are the type of union that shows up for other unions, and that, the Writers Guild and the Teamsters have such close kinship, right?
We're equally as talented. There's no doubt.
Dude, I have worked on sets. Okay. I have worked with Teamster drivers, right? I know the amount of expertise. It is, when you are a writer performer on a television set, you never feel less talented than when you are surrounded by all those IATSE crew members, right? And all of those Teamster drivers and location managers and casting directors. It is truly humbling, and I think that is one of the reasons Hollywood is a union town, because one of my favorite things about it is everybody on a set, there's 100 people, right? Every single person has a different job. Every job has its own pressures, its own things that it needs to make happen. And no one understands anybody else's job at
But
all.
we won't allow anybody to understand our jobs.
And yet we come together to make something together, and we have solidarity for each other. We know I can't do it without you, you can't do it without me, and we have, despite our differences, we're gonna.
So I'm negotiating a contract. I'm negotiating a contract one time. This is the last story.
Please.
And I am. Why are you getting bored? You said please.
No, please tell me the story.
Jesus Christ, man. Fuck.
Can I tell you, I've never been more terrified in a podcast interview.
So I'm negotiating this contract with her name, and I'm going to say her name. Her name was Sue Baden-Powell.
Okay.
Right. She's from England.
Related to Lord Baden-Powell, the founder of the Boy Scouts? Famous Baden-Powell from
England. I don't know. But she was tough. So she goes like this. She goes, so you're telling me, Sean, I have to have a Teamster. Anything with wheels has to have a Teamster on it. I go, that's right, ma'am. Yeah, absolutely. She goes, well, what if I take all the fucking wheels off the equipment? Do I still have a Teamster on that? I go, that's fucking hell. Can we take a caucus? I went outside. I didn't know how to answer that question. I'll just take all the wheels off the trucks, so I still need a Teamster on them. It's funny. But listen, I appreciate you coming out here.
I really appreciate it.
It's been awesome, and
Yeah.
I can't wait to work with you in the future. And what are your platforms? That social media platforms?
I do a podcast called Factually, and I do videos on YouTube. People can find me on YouTube there at Adam Conover. I'm a touring stand-up comic. People want to come see me. I'm going to be in Providence, Rhode Island pretty soon. A bunch of other tour dates. Head to adamconover.net for those tickets, and you can also see me. Rabble rousing at your local union rally.
Awesome,
So,
great. Thank you very much, and I appreciate
really,
you, sir.
really-
Thank you.
Really appreciate
Thanks.
you, buddy.
Thank you.